I'm standing on my own dock at 6 a.m., coffee in hand, when 3 police cruisers come screaming down my driveway in Willowbrook Estates. The HOA president is pointing at me like I'm public enemy number 1, screaming that I'm illegally fishing on community property. The irony? I've owned this 5-acre lake since 2009, and these people have been trespassing on my land for years. But here's what Karen and her board don't know. I'm not just some electrician they can push around. I've got 38 years of property deeds, for $100,000 worth of trail cameras, and a very patient attorney on speed dial. What would you do if your HOA tried to steal your family's lake? What happens next is the most satisfying legal destruction I've ever witnessed. These entitled bureaucrats picked the wrong property owner to mess with. My name's Mike, and I'm a 42-year-old electrician who thought he'd inherited a slice of paradise when my grandfather passed in 2009. 5 acres of pristine woodland with a 2-acre spring-fed lake that had been in our family since 1987. Every morning I'd walk down to the water's edge, breathing in that crisp scent of pine needles mixed with the earthy smell of lake water, listening to the haunting call of loons echoing across the surface. I have the original deed, the survey markers, and 38 years of property tax receipts. Never once was ownership disputed. But paradise has a way of attracting snakes. Between 2012 and 2015, luxury subdivision Willowbrook Estates sprouted up like mushrooms after rain. Suddenly, my quiet forest retreat was surrounded by $400,000 to $600,000 homes filled with upper-middle-class families who'd moved here expecting resort-style amenities. Many took one look at my lake and assumed it came with their property package. The first hints of trouble started in 2018. Polite requests at first. Could their kids fish from my dock? Would I mind if they brought kayaks over on weekends? I'm not unreasonable. I said sure, occasionally, but asked them to check with me first. Common courtesy, right? Then the complaints started. Anonymous calls to the county about mosquito problems. I started noticing beer cans and fishing line left around my shoreline. Enter Karen Whitfield. Stage left like a villain in a bad soap opera. Karen moved here from California in 2019, mid-50s, perfectly styled blonde bob that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, drove a white Mercedes SUV. She was a retired marketing executive with a smile that never reached her eyes and an impressive talent for making suggestions sound like orders. Within 6 months, Karen was elected HOA president, promising to enhance property values through community standards enforcement. Translation: she was going to make everyone's life miserable until they bent to her will. The first major incident happened on a Saturday morning in early 2023. I was heading down to the lake when I heard the mechanical whine of a cordless drill. Someone was installing signs around my property. No trespassing signs on my land without permission. I marched over to find Karen herself dressed in suburban safari wear directing 2 guys with a post hole digger. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice level. "What are you doing?" She turned around with that practiced smile. "Oh, Mike, just helping to clarify property boundaries for everyone's benefit. I understand you're putting signs on my property without permission." Her smile faltered. "Well, there's been some confusion about public access to community amenities." "There's no confusion. This is private property. These signs come down now." That's when I saw the real Karen for the first time. The mask slipped, and underneath was pure entitlement wrapped in righteous indignation. "I don't think you understand your position here," she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous whisper rich people use when they're about to threaten you. "This neighborhood has standards. Some people just don't fit." And that was the declaration of war. 2 weeks later, Karen appeared through the tree line like she was leading a military operation, flanked by 3 other HOA board members. "Mr. Henderson," she announced, "we need to discuss your ongoing violations of community standards." I looked around at my own property, my own lake, holding my own fishing rod. "I'm sorry, what now?" Karen's lackey stepped forward with an official-looking envelope. "This is a cease and desist order regarding your unauthorized use of shared recreational facilities." "Shared recreational facilities," I repeated. "You mean my private lake that I own?" "The HOA has determined that certain amenities impact community property values and therefore fall under our jurisdiction," Karen said. "Continued violations will result in daily fines of $2,000 with potential liens against your property." Here's the thing about bullies. They count on you being too shocked to respond effectively. Karen had clearly done this before, but I'd been raised by a grandfather who taught me that when someone threatens your livelihood, you don't get mad, you get smart. I'll need to review this with my attorney, is all I said. That weekend, I spent 12 hours at the county recorder's office. What I found was fascinating. The Willowbrook Estates HOA was incorporated in March 2014, 2 full years after I inherited my property in 2009. Here's a knowledge nugget for anyone dealing with HOA overreach. An HOA formed after you already own your property has zero legal authority over you. They can't retroactively claim jurisdiction over existing landowners. Armed with this information, I hired a real attorney. Cost me $5,000 for the consultation, but money well spent. Within 48 hours, my lawyer sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA demanding they stop their harassment campaign immediately. Karen's counter-move was predictably petty. She escalated to government authorities. 3 days later, a city code enforcement officer showed up with a clipboard and confused expression. Apparently, someone had filed a complaint claiming my property was in violation of 17 different municipal codes. Honestly, the inspector said, looking around my well-maintained property, I'm not sure why I'm here. Everything looks fine. The inspection took 20 minutes. 0 violations found. But Karen wasn't done. That evening, I got a call from Jim Martinez, my neighbor who'd been watching this drama unfold. Mike, I think you should know what Karen's saying at board meetings. She's telling people you threatened her physically. Jim, I've never even raised my voice at that woman. I know that, but she's got some folks scared. Thing is, there are others getting fed up with her power trips. Time to start documenting everything. Over the next month, Karen tried every bureaucratic agency imaginable. State Wildlife Department for commercial fishing operations. Social media campaigns. Isolation tactics. Even the mailman mentioned that some folks had been asking questions about my activities. Then I made a crucial discovery. I spent another weekend in the public records office, diving into the HOA's formation documents. What I found made my electrician's attention to detail very happy. The original 2014 HOA incorporation clearly excluded my property from their boundaries, but there was an amendment filed in 2019 that somehow magically expanded their jurisdiction to include my land. Here's another knowledge nugget. Property cannot be added to an HOA without the owner's written consent. It's completely illegal, but people try it anyway because most folks don't know the law. I took this straight to my attorney who immediately perked up. Mike, this is fraudulent. They've been operating under false jurisdiction for 4 years. We can not only get them to back off, we can go after them for harassment under color of law. The attorney sent another letter with significantly sharper teeth, threatening a lawsuit for fraudulent boundary claims. The HOA board caved faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. But never underestimate a narcissist who's been publicly embarrassed. Karen shifted tactics from pseudo-legal harassment to personal attacks and false police reports. Thank God for security cameras. I'd installed them the month before, mainly to keep an eye on the lake. When Karen claimed I'd confronted her aggressively one evening, the footage clearly showed me working in my shop during the exact time she claimed I'd threatened her. The officer reviewed the footage, then walked back to Karen. When he returned, he looked apologetic. Sir, I'm going to file a report about filing false police reports. That's a misdemeanor in this county. The false police report backfired in ways Karen didn't expect. When I walked the perimeter of my land with fresh eyes, I found something that made my blood boil. A well-worn footpath leading from the subdivision straight to my lake. Following the trail to its end, I discovered an unauthorized beach club. Someone had built a crude dock extension, permanent Adirondack chairs around a stone fire pit, fishing rod holders bolted to trees, and a weathered cooler chained to an oak tree. I installed trail cameras that weekend. 6 of them, motion-activated with night vision. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented 47 separate instances of trespassing. The real jackpot was Karen herself, appearing in the footage no fewer than 8 times. Time for detective work. Jim Martinez had become my intelligence network, and he delivered information that made the trespassing suddenly make sense. Mike, look at this, he said, showing me the HOA's annual budget. Lake maintenance, $15,000 over 3 years. They've been charging residents for maintaining your lake, Jim explained. Karen told everyone the HOA was responsible for keeping the community water feature in good condition. But it got worse. The HOA's insurance policy listed my lake as a covered community recreational water feature. Let that sink in. The HOA was collecting insurance premiums from residents to cover property they didn't own while I was paying separate insurance and bearing all liability risk. I called my attorney immediately. Mike, this isn't just harassment anymore. This is fraud. Multiple counts. We're talking potential criminal charges. Karen's desperation manifested in ways I never could have predicted. One Monday morning, I discovered my dock had been vandalized overnight. Someone had taken a crowbar to the decking and stolen my tackle box, about $2,000 worth of equipment that had belonged to my grandfather. My trail cameras captured every detail. 2 teenagers doing the dirty work around 2 a.m., but the real prize was the wide shot that caught Karen's white Mercedes parked nearby with engine running and headlights off. Amateur hour, Detective Rodriguez said when I showed him the footage. Conspiracy to commit vandalism plus using minors to commit crimes. Over the next 2 weeks, I received a barrage of anonymous complaints filed with every government agency imaginable. The most creative went to the State Environmental Agency, claiming my fishing was disrupting endangered waterfowl nesting. The biologist who investigated was actually impressed. You've got one of the healthiest small lake environments I've seen in years. Karen's social media campaign escalated to all-out character assassination. Someone created fake Facebook profiles and posted inflammatory comments on local business pages. But her master stroke of stupidity came when she tried to turn my customers against me. A homeowner called saying someone had warned them I was under investigation for fraud and they should be careful about paying me. The number traced back to Karen's landline. Here's where Karen made a critical tactical error. She went after my livelihood. My attorney was practically salivating. Tortious interference with business relationships. That's big money damages. We can now sue for lost income, reputation damage, emotional distress. But Karen's masterpiece of self-destruction came when she decided to take her case to social media with a public video. The 20-minute rant claimed I was part of a conspiracy to destroy property values and that my lake was harboring criminal activity. According to Karen, I was working with outside agitators and my fishing was coded signals to criminal associates. The comment section was pure gold. Neighbors responding with confusion, disbelief, and growing concern for Karen's mental state. But the real kicker came at the end when Karen made direct threats. If authorities won't protect this community, residents may need to take matters into their own hands. The community response was immediate and decisive. By the next HOA meeting, 6 board members had submitted written demands for Karen's resignation. The monthly town hall meeting had never seen a crowd like this. Word had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The parking lot was packed. Cars lined the street for 3 blocks. Inside, every seat was filled with people standing along the walls. Karen sat in the front row, surrounded by empty chairs like a quarantine zone. Mayor Johnson called the meeting to order. Mrs. Whitfield has requested time to address ongoing threats to community safety. Mr. Henderson has requested equal time to respond. Karen launched into a prepared speech about dangerous individuals who refuse to respect community standards. After 10 minutes of increasingly unhinged accusations, she concluded with threatening vigilante violence in front of 150 witnesses and a TV camera. I walked to the podium carrying a single manila folder. Mrs. Whitfield, this document shows I've owned 5 acres, including a private lake, since 2009. Could you explain why your HOA has spent $15,000 over 4 years maintaining property you don't own? The crowd stirred. I displayed the insurance documents on the projector screen. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Or maybe you'd like to discuss why you filed tax appeals claiming partial ownership of my property. I pulled out my phone. Last week you offered me $25,000 to withdraw my complaints. Would you like to explain what you meant when you said small business owners can't afford legal attention? I played the recording. Karen's voice filled the room, offering bribes and making threats. The crowd erupted. Actually, Virginia is a one-party consent state, I said calmly. But here's my favorite part. I clicked to the next slide showing trail camera footage of Karen supervising teenagers vandalizing my dock at 2 a.m. That's when Karen completely lost it. This is a conspiracy, she screamed. He's working with criminals to destroy our neighborhood. That's when Sheriff Williams walked through the back door flanked by 2 deputies. Karen Whitfield, you're under arrest for filing false police reports, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit vandalism. The room exploded. Camera flashes lit up Karen's face as she was read her rights and led away in handcuffs. The crowd burst into spontaneous applause for justice finally being served. 3 weeks later, the legal dominoes fell exactly as predicted. Karen pled guilty to multiple fraud charges in exchange for probation, community service, and $50,000 in restitution distributed among the HOA residents she'd been stealing from. The HOA board voted unanimously to exclude my property from their jurisdiction permanently, along with a formal public apology published in the local newspaper. 6 months after Karen's arrest, I hosted the first annual Willowbrook Lake Day at my property. What started as a simple neighborhood barbecue turned into a celebration of community healing. Families brought picnic blankets, kids learned to fish, and the smell of grilled burgers mixed with the clean scent of lake water in the perfect summer evening air. The lake that had been a source of conflict became a symbol of what communities could accomplish when good people stood up to bullies. I partnered with the state wildlife department to create an educational program teaching kids about lake ecology. My electrical business thrived beyond expectations, and the HOA transformed under new leadership with transparent budgeting and genuine community spirit. 1 year later, I'm sitting on my dock at sunrise, coffee steaming in the cool morning air, listening to the familiar call of loons across the water. The sound of children's laughter drifts from the shoreline, where families are arriving for our weekly conservation program. Karen moved away shortly after her conviction, and nobody misses her. The neighborhood has become what it always could have been, a place where families support each other instead of tearing each other down. Sometimes justice tastes as sweet as a perfect morning cup of coffee by a peaceful lake, surrounded by friends who know that standing up to corruption is always worth the fight.